Welcome to LOA Today. Walt and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Wednesday, July 18, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, your second daily dose of happy for the day. And Wendy, I have to tell you, I am not used to what's happened the last couple of days. I've had 3 straight doses of Cindy Chavez, and I loved it. But I missed having you as my daily host, so it's nice to be talking to you again after a 2-day delay. I mean, can you imagine that?
Well, thank you for missing me.
Yeah,
that's a nice feeling.
It is. It's it's true. I like talking with you. I like doing our shows together. So I mean, we're actually starting a tad late, but as I was kind of setting things up at the last second, I asked you how you were going. You said your day was going great, and I loved hearing that because my day has been a little bit dicey. So I want to hear about great. Tell me about great.
Well, okay. So oftentimes you've asked me, when something really fabulous has happened, so how does it feel? And you remember what my typical response is? It feels like normal.
It feels normal. Yeah, that's right.
It feels like normal. So I had been asking the question a week or two ago, and I've been saying it on the air, how do you know when you're really aligned? Because the only way I really knew when I was aligned with my desire was either it showed up or it didn't.
Yeah,
and if
right.
it didn't, then kind of go back, not back to the drawing board, but, hey, poking around what's in there that's not quite working yet, that's keeping me from being aligned. And if something does show up in my life, I go, okay, I guess I was aligned. But as a curious person that I am, I want to understand how to know the difference. I like to know things in advance. I like to know what are the specific steps or feelings so that you can predict whether you're in alignment or out of alignment. Because to me, waiting for something to show up or not to show up, it doesn't feel very efficient in my world. It kind of feels like I don't like doing the waiting game. So having to wait for anything is like, yeah, that doesn't work. So, I've been on Project X since January, and things have been moving forward. Lots of wonderful manifestations, lots of evidences that it was in process, but I wasn't getting anything solid that says it's here, not to mention, in a way, I still don't know what it's going to look like. And that kind of disturbed me, but I kept moving forward. So today I happen to have been a guest on my friend Rhonda's radio show, and she interviewed me on the law of attraction. And it was first of all, the show was fun. I enjoyed doing what I was doing. And then a little bit after the show was over, she and I got on the phone and started talking. And what was interesting is for her, today's show gave her clarity about what she really wants to be doing going forward.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, that's nice. But as long as we were on the phone, and actually the reason we were on the phone, the reason is because I said, I got something just kind of stumbling around inside of me and I want to work out. So can we talk? She said, sure. And I said, it's on this Project X thing. I said, and I think I said this on one of our shows recently, I have a date when I'm exiting my job. Like I was given a date as inner guidance. Like I'm done by such and such date.
You did say that.
Yeah. And since then, I got the day that I'm going to give my boss my resignation. So I know exactly when that's going to be. And what was interesting is after I did the show with her this morning, one of my good friends who I work with had been listening to that show, and that particular station has a chat room. And my friend was asking questions in the chat room. And so I was answering them during the live show. And when the show was over, I IM'd her just to say, hey, did you get the insights that you were looking for? And so we got into this conversation. And the reason I share this is because she was kind of tiptoeing on something where I felt maybe I should tell her I'm leaving. So while we were IMing, I just asked, can I tell her I'm going? And I got no. And I went, why not? And you're not aligned yet. And I felt it. I mean, it's like, even though I asked the question, why not? I kind of knew the answer, but I kind of like it when I get it solidly from my inner being.
Well, I'm just impressed that you get, you're one of the few people I know who does get a straight answer like that. So I'm just impressed by that all by itself.
so here I am getting, you're not aligned. And I went, okay, so when I'm going to give my resignation is not very far from now. So I'm like, how the heck do I get aligned? What is out of place? So that's when I called my friend Rhonda and said, hey, can we talk? So I'm like, oh, all excited for her that she now has better clarity what she's doing going forward. And I said, okay, now it's time for me. And I said, help me with this. And so part of the process, she and I both agreed that what we do is kind of an advanced process. One, because we're both advanced coaches, but two, we're also both advanced in the process of using law of attraction. But, you know, she'll say, okay, so why do you feel you're not aligned? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then I'm just going to relay. Here's how it went. She goes, okay, an energy just popped in. I can feel the thing that's stopping you, but I can't put words to it. And I went, me too.
Well, that makes two of you.
Yeah, it's not quite as bad as like a deep feeling in the pit of my stomach, but there was this, you know me, I love guttural sounds, to describe things. It didn't have a sense of, yes, let's give my resignation, everything's cool. It was kind of like, there's something there. And so we just kind of kept poking around it, and she would get a question to ask. And, it was interesting because she said, well, do you think it's that, because I was saying how in the past when I've left jobs, it seems so much easier. And so she said, well, do you think it's because you have so much more to lose? You have a mortgage, you have a huge house, blah, blah, blah. And I went, that feels really dense when I think that. Well, she's the one who's taught me the tool called light and heavy, which is when you think a thought, does it feel light and buoyant, or does it feel heavy and dense?
Okay.
And I said, heavy and dense. And so she had asked me the question, is it because of this? Well, the fact that it was dense, I know this may sound weird, meant nope, that's not the answer. Because the answer we were looking for would be light and buoyant, which would let us know we were on the right track. So saying that I had more to lose financially this time wasn't it. And I said, honestly, I'm not afraid of losing my house. I mean, I don't want to lose my house, but that doesn't feel right. So we just kind of kept going back and forth. And honestly, she threw out so many questions, and I got so many things that I was asking myself, couldn't even possibly try to tell you what all went down today. Mm-hmm. However, finally we got to a point where she said something and I went, oh, that's it. And then things started to shift in how I felt. And it had to do with, I said, when I bought my house, which is the first chapter in our book, when I bought my house, I knew what it was I wanted. I wanted a house. I had something solid to focus on. When I wanted my Jaguar, another chapter in our book. Mm-hmm. These are all promo marketing attempts to have people buy our book.
Okay, well, that's fair. I mean, I appreciate it because it's our book, so that's okay.
So when I wanted my new car, I knew what I wanted. Boom, I focused on it, and I got it. And then the third chapter, I wanted a new group of friends that really were in the same energetic space I was, and boom, I got it. And what I said to Rhonda is, in each one of these cases, I knew the specifics of what I wanted. But I said, in this case, I don't know, because I don't really know what my new career is going to look like. I just know I want to be free to pursue this new thing that feels good, that feels satisfying to me. So as we kind of went around and around, it was really fascinating because she said, well, you know the essence of what it feels like? And I said, I do. It feels really solid. It feels enlightening. And then she started talking about herself, about that she's a global influencer. And that really stuck out to me. And I went, that's powerful, global influencer. I said, I think there's something in there for me. And then we kept talking, and then I went, global impact. I have always wanted to make a global impact. That's the word that resonates with me, global impact. And this is an odd thing, and honestly, there's no way to describe it in words that I know of. It's more of the feeling and just kind of watch it as it transforms. But I went, that's it. I didn't have something to focus on before. And I felt like I was in this forever search or this spiral of what is it I want to focus on. And the moment I landed on focus on global impact, I'm all about making a global impact, knowing what I know and doing what I do. It's like the dust settled. And that gnawing feeling in me earlier where, nope, can't start telling people you're ready to leave, kind of went away. And I went, oh my gosh. I mean, it feels so surreal because it feels so easy because I didn't do anything to make the feeling change. The feeling just changed. I had a new thought, and that new thought caused the feeling to change.
Which is what we're taught is supposed to happen, but nevertheless, to have it be that clean is pretty unusual, rather.
It was so fascinating. And then it's like it opened up a whole new arena for me of things that I've been thinking about, that like all the puzzle pieces and the tumblers started going, everything was clicking into place. And I went, yes, this is what I'd been missing. And so then this next piece came up. Let's see, how do I describe it? We were talking about so now I know what I want in how it feels, and I have this phrase, global impact, and I know what it feels like internally for me to sense that I am making a global impact and helping consciousness grow and expand, and et cetera. But I said, the fact that I don't know, like, what's the next step, the fact that, okay, my last day of work will be on such and such date. Well, then on the next day, it's like, what do I do? And that question was kind of there. And so she and I were just, chatting on that for a few moments. And then all of a sudden, this idea dropped in from my Christianity. I said, okay, let's go back. And she and I are both ex-Christians. And so we both know the Bible pretty well. And I said, let's go back to Genesis. According to that story, the world was created in 7 days. And I said, let's we believe that for right now and just talk about that story. And I said, here's what I'm getting. It's like on day one, and I'm going to get this wrong, so don't anybody who's a Bible scholar go, oh my God, what's wrong with her? But because this is for illustration purposes only.
So there will not be a quiz. That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Exactly. So like on day one, let's say God created the heavens and the earth.
Okay.
But maybe on day one, he didn't know what he was going to do on day two. Because this is the metaphor I was getting, that on day one, when he created the heavens and earth, he looked back and he goes, ooh, I really like that. You know what? Now we need some animals. So on day two, he created the animals. And he went, ooh, I love that creation. Okay, now I think we need some human beings. And so on day three, let's say he created humans. And then he's like, ooh, I like that. Let's give them plant life. That'll make the whole environment look better and richer. So on day four, the plants show up. And then and the idea is every day he saw what was created. And then the idea came to him looking at his creation, what he wanted to do next. And I saw this as an ever evolving creation. And Rhonda was like, oh my God, that feels so right. And it feels so light. And I said, me too. It's exciting. And I said, so what I'm getting from this concept, even though I totally botched up the historical documentation of Genesis, what I was getting is, so let's say my last day is on a Friday. Well, I knew what to do to get to Friday, which was be done with my job. And on Saturday when I wake up, I'll look at, okay, I don't have a job anymore. What's next? And I'll get new, fresh guidance and insight. And then I'll follow whatever that is on Saturday. And then on Sunday when I wake up, I'll look back at what I created on Saturday and go, ooh, okay, I can see what's next. And then I'll start working on what I do on Sunday, and so forth and so on. And then it's like it just came to me because I love templates to follow. And I went, I already have an internal template. I used to be a costume designer. And I used to, like a client would tell me, I'm looking for a costume that can do such and such. And then I'd come up with an idea, they'd sign off on it, and then I'd start creating it. But never, ever, ever in the history of creating any design did the end result ever match what I started with in the beginning, ever. Because it was always an ever-evolving creation.
Mm.
It looked similar. The essence of the garment looked like, acted like, felt like, was worn by the actress in the way that the essence had been originated. But the finished product kept evolving as I was cutting out the pattern, and I go, you know what, maybe the armhole should do this instead. Then I'd start sewing it together, and I'd go, I don't really like the length of this. I think I should shorten it. Then I would do that, and I go, you know what, something's missing. I should add some trim. And then I add some trim, and I'm like, ooh, this is good. Let's add a little bit more over there. Oh, and take a little bit of that away. And then I do that. And I didn't stop creating, if you will, or putting my hands in the clay until I looked at it and went, yeah, that's it. And that's when I called the client and said, come pick it up. It's ready. So that's a template that I have lived for many years where I know how to create. And what's interesting is that template or that process was hidden from me. Like of course it's part of my history, but I didn't remember that until today. And all of a sudden I went, oh, I know how to do this. And so what's interesting, Walt, is, now I get this. When we first started, when Rhonda and I first started, she said, what do you feel? And even though we were having a hard time putting words on it, I just said, scared. Oh. And I just cried. I mean, it's like the tears just, I cried. I said, I'm scared. And as we talked about, what am I scared of? I'm like, unfamiliarity. I have no idea where I'm going. And if I'm going to take this giant leap of faith or trust or whatever we want to term it, I don't want to do it from a place of fear because I don't know where I'm going. And as we went through all these different, considerations, I landed in a place of, you know what? I still don't know exactly what it will look like, but I, one, know how it'll feel, which is totally fulfilling and very expansive inside of me. And two, I have a template for how this works. It's like, oh, I just understood the process of creation for me because I've done it before. And because I have such a solid relationship with my inner being, I completely trust guidance. And I trust that on the Saturday I leave my job, I'll know exactly what to do. And I know that on Sunday, the next piece will come to me. And so now I have this level of certainty because in a way, I now know what the process looks like. And that took away the fear. I'm not scared anymore. And maybe an hour or two after Rhonda and I got off the phone, I just kept rolling all these ideas around in my thinking. And when I went back to, could I tell my friend? It was, if I want to. Like that block of, nope, you're not aligned, was gone.
Yeah.
But I don't want to right now. It's like I really want to continue to bathe these new ideas that came to me today so that when I start telling people, it's so solid in me that nobody can shake me. Because I don't know if you've been in this situation before, but I have, where I go to tell even close friends who are my confidants and who are people who support me, and I'll say, I'm going to do something like quit my job. And their fear of what it would feel like for them to quit the job actually would get activated. And so they say it to me in words of, oh, Wendy, are you sure that's a wise thing to do?
Oh, sure. That's a common comment for somebody to make in a situation like that.
Right. But it would actually be their fear.
Oh, yeah.
And so I recognize it's so important for me to be so solid that if anybody says that to me through their own lens, that I can say, yes, I am absolutely certain.
I mean, I can tell you without any doubt whatsoever, from the moment that you were talking about making a global impact, you know what was going through my head? What was going through my head was, imagine a side view. Here's the Earth, and here's a little tiny Walt, and Walt and the Earth are coming together, and Walt makes a little tiny impact on the Earth. That's a global impact. That's like me landing on the ground real hard and making a Walt-shaped hole in the ground. That's a global impact. That's what I was thinking.
Okay, well, did you have a picture of Wendy? I hope you didn't have me go splat on the ground.
No, it wasn't Wendy. It was Walt. So perfectly illustrating your point that I was bringing me to it. It had nothing to do with you. I was bringing me to it.
Oh, because you were like having your own projections of what it would be like if you were in my shoes. Okay.
That's why it was a Walt-shaped hole.
It's a Walt-shaped hole. I like that. So one of the things I will say here, which amazes me, and why I forget this each time just kind of blows my mind. I guess it's kind of like a woman who gives birth and then they forget the pain because they have the joy of the child.
Mm-hmm.
I forget that even when I'm setting my intention for something, it never shows up the way you think. It just doesn't. And I had an expectation that I would, quote, know when it's time to exit the day job because I had set some money targets to be my evidence. In other words, if I had made a certain amount of money, or if I had X number of new clients or something, it all had to do with money, then I'll know that it's time to go. Now, here's what's really ironic, without being totally boastful, and I won't give out the number. I have a lot of money in my checking account right now, more than I've ever had in my entire life.
Good for you.
And I realized, and it was after Rhonda and I had our conversation, my inner being then threw that in like, and look how much money you have as a reserve. You've got nothing to be afraid of. And I'm like, oh my God. I remember when I left the costume company I worked at, or I worked for someone else. I was a W-2 employee, and I left to start freelancing. And all my friends said you need a minimum of 3 to 6 months of expense money in your account before you can leave, because then you have a buffer. Well, back then I had zero in my checking. I had zero in savings. I had zero in investments. I had nothing that I owned that I could sell. And I had 3 weeks of work ahead of me that I knew how much money I would get for those 3 weeks. But I had no promise of any other work beyond those 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's a little daunting.
And yet, back then, I had such a knowing it was the right thing for me to do. I just did it. And I freelanced for, I don't know, 10 years, maybe 8 years. And then I had a costume partner. He and I started a company for another 5 years. But it's like, it wasn't taking a chance. I didn't even know law of attraction back then, but it's time. And I had such a powerful knowing inside of me, nothing was going to change my mind. I knew that I had to be so solid. Now, I didn't have the word alignment back then, but I knew I had to be so solid in my decision. Nobody could knock me off my feet. I knew my mother would be the one person who would have a huge issue with this, because she had just divorced my dad and she was living with me and I was supporting her financially. And if I wasn't working, it could upset her financial stability.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, she had gone to visit some friends and she was out of town. And at the time, I didn't have a Rhonda, I had a Sherry. and at the time I was a Christian, and I said, Sherry, I have to have some scripture that is so solid that even my mother cannot persuade me, because the scripture is so big and potent. And when I say, this is the scripture I got, she won't be able to mess with me. And I don't remember the scripture now, but I found the scripture. Sherry and I worked on it, and I'm like, yeah, this is solid. So when I told Mom I was leaving, and this is the scripture that God had given to me, she was just quiet. She didn't say, oh, yay, but she didn't push me or fight me. And it was like, whew, that was the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah, sure.
And so here I am in a similar situation, except we have a mortgage. Oh my gosh, that's very different. But I'm not supporting my mother anymore.
Which is an offset.
Yes, so it's just me. And now I'm going to go to something, I think I started the conversation with this, that I had been asking the question for a while. How do you know when you're aligned? how do you know when all your ducks are in a row?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say what came to me is it feels so peaceful. Like to do anything else would feel not right. But not from a place of, oh, it would be wrong. It just, everything where I am sitting right now feels so incredibly peaceful. I have a knowing that on such and such day, I'm giving my resignation, and on the other day, I'm leaving, and that's my last day of work, period, end of report. And no, I don't know what's going to happen right now on the Saturday after, but it doesn't feel frightening to me.
That's big right there.
That's diametrically different than how I felt 5 hours ago.
Wow.
5 hours ago, I bursted out in tears like a little baby. I was so scared.
That's really
interesting. And now I'm so confident, so solid.
Wow. That's a big transition in a 5 hour period. And in light of my own stuff I'm dealing with right now, I mean, my stuff really doesn't parallel. I'm sitting here thinking, is there some way I can parallel it? No, I can't. It's really quite different. But I do know that what I'm dealing with is where, among other things, I'm not in alignment the way I need to be. And so hearing your story is interesting. I still haven't figured out how to connect it to mine to make it, give me a new insight or something. But just the fact that you got into alignment from such a difficult place that quickly and so solidly that your belief level is as high as it is, that is pretty big. I don't think I can come up with anything that's bigger than that. That's really big.
Well, I think what fits with that is the question that my friend who I work with asked in the chat room that I answered on the show. She said, what do you do if you feel like you're really aligned to your desire, but it's not showing up? And I don't think I've ever given an answer as clearly as I did today. And it was, then you're not as aligned as you think you are.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I didn't know what you were going to say, but that's exactly what I thought.
So like, I don't think I've ever had the words come out of my mouth with such clarity, which is you're not as aligned as you think you are.
Right.
And then she asked a follow-up question. So then how do you get into the alignment that you need to be in? And my response was questions. You gotta ask questions, lots of questions, and seek for the answer. Allow the answer to come in. And just because you get one answer doesn't mean you stop asking questions. You keep asking questions and getting answers until you land at a feeling that I now have, which is very peaceful. It's all good. It's all lined up. It's on its way. I'm not wavering, not shaking, not worried. It's done.
One of the common Abraham responses to questions like that, and it's a response that they have put into many of their books, it's in their workshops, it's in a lot of different places, is, what do you do? Whatever you have to. You do whatever you have to do in order to get into alignment. And what you just described is an excellent way, one that you've used to perfection, to get into alignment. But what's the way? It's the one. It's whatever you had to do, and that's what you had to do. You found this is your way to do things, so that's what you had to do.
Well, and I think when Abraham says do whatever it is you need to do to get into alignment, oftentimes they suggest distraction.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say there are plenty of times that distraction is totally appropriate. But I have found that when there's something big that I want, or small, and it just seems to be eluding me, it's because there is something in the way. There is some insidious thought that's going on behind the scenes that I just haven't quite acknowledged or been able to nail. And so that's where I find when I ask questions and new insights appear, put it that way. I ask a question, I get an insight. I ask another question, like a follow-up, I get another insight. Then I'm like, okay, but what about this? And I get another insight. And eventually, it starts to unravel whatever thought had been under the surface now out in the bright open. And I'm looking at it, I'm talking to it, I'm touching it, I'm feeling it. And I get to find where it's not true. Because where I started today, I was so scared of the unfamiliarity. I was so scared. I've never done this before. And what if I'm making a big mistake? Even though everything else has felt totally lined up, that was there.
Sure.
And as I was asking, how do I get through this unfamiliarity? Is somehow, because I had released the scaredness, which was a very childlike feeling, by the way. And it doesn't have to be, but for me, it felt very childlike. Like, I'm just really scared. All of a sudden, I started getting these new ideas, which I would call insights, where I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I've done this before. I was a costume designer. This is the process of my creations. And I won't go into another one, but I have a television show that I've been binge watching. And I keep asking, why am I binge watching Fixer Upper, which is about, remodeling homes.
Right.
And all of a sudden, what came to me is the designer was literally following the identical process in how she remodeled and redesigned homes as I did when I did it to costumes.
Oh, so it's very familiar.
Yeah, and what was interesting, though, is the television show metaphor came to me first. And then I received the awareness and the memory of that's what I did as a costume designer. And at that point, I went, oh, I have my template. And now it's not unfamiliar to me anymore. And so my fear was about entering into an unfamiliar world. And I didn't know anybody who had done what I was about to do for it to feel okay to me. But see, now I not only have watched the designer on Fixer Upper do it, but I've watched me do it. I know what the process of creation is. I do it all the time. So I unraveled the fear piece, which was the feeling, by asking it questions.
I know that when I ask questions, or even when I've talked with somebody else who was asking questions, your questions lead you, and your insights lead you to unraveling. I know that there are times where if I ask questions, my questions lead to just focusing on the thing I don't like. They don't actually always. I mean, sometimes they do. Sometimes they do lead to some good insights and some good ideas and so forth. But sometimes I find I just am focused on this thing that I don't want, and I'm not getting anything more than that out of it. I mean, you have this really, really cool connection that you've built with the rest of you, the inner part of you, and that interconnection really serves you well. But what about the rest of us who haven't got that so far? I mean, how do you use the question process in that situation?
So what's coming to me, Walt, meaning this is the insight that's coming to me in response to your question, is when you said sometimes you ask questions and it kind of, my words, lead you down a dark rabbit hole instead.
Sure, okay.
Okay. I would say that's because when you asked the question, you weren't focused on breaking through to the solution.
Oh.
The way I am very focused. Like I am totally, I don't care what response comes to me, because whatever response, that to me is just it's just data. It has a neutral palette. It has no negative or positive feeling. I'm just looking for information, because a question for me is I'm looking for information to unravel this picture, because my end game is to feel relief. My end game is to break through this negative feeling that is not working for me. And what was coming to me, and it's very subtle, but what was coming to me when you were asking the question is, if you're not really cautious about how you're focusing the question, it can lead you down a dark rabbit hole. Because I get the impression that when you got the answer, you started thinking about the answer.
Yeah, sure.
And when I think about the answer, I go, okay, well, that's interesting information.
Next.
And then that answer causes me to ask the next question.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm going to keep asking questions until I get the result I want, which is to break through this feeling that's not working for me.
Okay.
Does that help at all?
Well, I got nothing. I mean, you're the one who gets all the insights. I'm sitting here saying, okay, so insight come, and I got nothing.
Well, Well, but let me ask you this, and maybe this is a little personal and hard to do right here, when we're live on a show, but...
Oh, hey, we've done it before. Why not? Let's give it a shot. Who knows?
So when I say, okay, there's something you're wanting to change in your life, or there's some feeling that you go, this is not working for me, and then you ask a question, are you asking the question from the place of, no matter what the answer is, I know that where I'm trying to go is to get to a better feeling?
And when you phrase it that way, which is pretty similar to what you phrased before, but for some reason this time I got something. So this time, okay, the thing that I got was, let's see, how do I phrase it? That's always the fun part, right? Turning this feeling into a word or words. The response was, yeah, I guess I do have a tendency to just stick on this. Yeah, I got an answer, but I'm just refocused on the thing that I don't want. I'm not breaking away from it.
Because the intuitive insight, it's like I see it as a picture. Like you have, what you want is to feel better. Mm-hmm. But then you ask a question.
Well, actually, there is part of it right there. Yes, I do want to feel better. But when I get myself stuck, yeah, this is starting to make a little sense now. When I get myself stuck, it's more than being focused on wanting to feel better. I find that I'm also focused on why haven't the results happened. I get the division of my attention.
That's my point. Because what I was sensing is you're not solidly focused on what you want, and you get into what is itis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like now you get the answer, and it causes you to get more stuck on the problem, and now that's what is, and you're more stuck on that, and your focus tends to stay there.
And I mentioned earlier, my day was a little bit dicey. Well, I don't want to get into the particulars about it, but as sort of like a general view of it, there are a number of people involved in this situation, and there are a number of factors at play. And it when I look at it from a what is perspective, just to give you that sense of it, it's this horrible knot that I can't see any way to untangle. So my goal, obviously, is to not just feel better about it, but to find a way to wrench my attention away from the fact that I've got this great big knot there in the way, and focus it on, I don't know, something else. And the what is itis, like you say, is really, really strong because it just keeps coming back, bringing me back to, yeah, but it's a knot.
Okay, so here it is, Walt. Okay, this is me giving you a coaching response.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
The knot is the clue. That's what you need to be looking at and asking questions of, what does this feel like, and how is it serving me, and what is it trying to say to me? Don't jump over the knot straight to, I got to find a better feeling place, because the very answers that you're needing are within the knot.
Okay.
Just like, for me, the answers I was needing was in what was I feeling? And it took me a little while to get to what does this feel like? And that's when I said scared. And all of the answers evolved for me once I started opening up, what does the scared feel like? What is it telling me? Well, it brought me to unfamiliarity. Why is that so important? Because how do I know what to do unless I have something that feels familiar? And ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. So don't jump over the knot.
Well, I haven't actually. And every time I ask questions along those lines, how does it make me feel? It makes me feel sick, to be perfectly honest. And even more than sick, it does make me feel scared, and it makes me feel like that some of the major goals that I've set for the year I'm not going to reach. And it just turns the knot is. I mean, you're alluding to the fact that there's an emotional context to it, and there is. The knot is emotional. It's emotional in almost every way. I mean, I'm kind of struggling to think of a way that it's not emotional. But it's an emotional knot, and that knot is wrapped up with all these fears and anxieties and concerns about, oh God, we're not going to get there. I've had this grand plan I've been following. It's been working great up until about a month ago, and then now it's all starting to fall apart. I don't know what to do with it. That's what it feels like.
So you're focused on what is.
I'm definitely stuck on what is, yeah. So now you were talking about getting into the feeling of it. Well, I was trying to describe the feeling of it, and the feeling of it is not good. It's really uncomfortable. It's really unpleasant. But I don't know where to go with that.
Well, so each one of those statements that you had about that feeling makes me feel like we're not going to land where we wanted to land. It's going to, there's probably a whole lot of other expectations in there that you feel like you're going to disappoint, or you're going to disappoint Louise, or, just, we had these great money goals and now it's not going to happen. And, every one of those thoughts you want to talk to. You want to ask it questions. Is this true? Is it absolutely true? Is there a lie in here? Am I believing something that's not true? That all of these things are hinged upon.
So dissect it for the stuff that's the self-fulfilling prophecy part, but it's only self-fulfilling because I'm fulfilling it. The part that I'm the one who's turning it into something.
Well, you have attached meaning to all of these thoughts, and that's why they're showing up with these feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So I suggest that you address each of these different thoughts and determine if they're even valid. Because a lot of times we have thoughts that are running around that, we've thought about them many times and they've turned into beliefs, but we've also grown as human beings. And sometimes those thoughts are obsolete. It's like they're running amok because, I believed that once, and there once was a time I didn't have the skills and I didn't have the resources and I didn't believe all the things I believe now. And that thing is just still running autopilot.
Perhaps. I mean, there may be something like that going on. I certainly wouldn't want to rule that out. From where I'm sitting, it feels like all of it is present. None of it is past stuff. I could be wrong, but it just feels like everything right now is present. It's all what's going on right now, and what's going on right now. I don't like the pattern. I can see it leading to where I don't want it to go, and I keep running down that rabbit hole and driving myself crazy.
And bottom line, because it feels so not good, it's not how your inner being's looking at it.
True.
And somehow, some way, your inner being is looking at all the same things that you are and sees it completely different and tells a very different story.
Exactly. That's why I said earlier, it's the Abraham thing. Somehow, some way, you got to get into alignment.
So that's where I start going, all right, inner being, smart aleck, you see all, you know all, you're infinite intelligence, and you're able to see this from a perspective that I'm not seeing it, and I sure would like to know what that is.
Yeah, I feel like saying, spill the beans, for goodness sake. Come on.
Well, and I will tell you, Walt, if you're in a big knot, you can ask the question from that space, but don't expect to get the answer. Because if you're looking for an answer, you're going to get an answer that equals something that feels just as crappy as the feeling.
I believe that, yeah.
That's when you want to distract and put yourself into a better feeling place so you're more relaxed, and then the answer can float in if it chooses to do so at that time.
And that has been the pattern that has been most effective. I mean, today I ran into the knot a couple times, and the most recent time was within the last couple of hours, and I literally have not taken the time to get back into alignment in any other way possible before we did the podcast. I was actually looking forward to the podcast, like, well, podcasts always make me feel good. That's a good way to get into alignment.
Yes.
I'll do that. That works. I can do that. I mean, so, if people understood just how much we use the podcast for leverage, they would probably be listening in even more record numbers than they are.
Or they'd all want to say, I need to call in.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Get on there and they can talk with me. Maybe, it'll turn my life around too.
That would be fun. We would enjoy that. Yeah. But hey, they might even have I'm sorry, say that again. They might even have an answer for me. They might say, hey, Walt, had you thought about this? And they're like, oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So even now, as you think about the knot, has it changed any? Not the circumstances, just the feeling.
Well,
does it not feel as intense?
I can't honestly say that. It's centered more in my stomach.
It has settled in your stomach?
It's centered more in my stomach. Before it was a little bit more diffused. Now it's like it's more, contained, more precisely shaped and focused and so forth. The location is more specific.
So when I'm coaching somebody, I would say to them, having heard what you just said, wonderful. that means it's changing.
That's
Your
true.
desires for it to change, it's now changing.
That's true. It
And
has changed.
And I would assume that it's changing into this form because this form is going to be easier to flick it away eventually.
Okay. I'm not convinced of it yet, but I would like that. That would be good.
Well, before it was kind of diffused and all over and kind of hard to put your hands around, but now it's kind of more narrow. The focus of it has become more narrow.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean,
which also means it's kind of squished itself. It's smaller.
It's condensed more.
Yeah.
That's true.
So it's changing.
Yeah,
and we've kind of done a lot of laughing, and you know what you think about laughing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it soothes all sorts of things.
It does. It does. So, I mean, obviously this isn't a coaching session, but if it were a coaching session, you basically continue the same process, right? You're going through the process of asking more questions, probing and poking and basically making yourself a nuisance to this thing, to this knot, this ball that's in the way, this block.
I find that most of the time, whatever it is that we're holding on to is connected to something that is not true.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I'm sure that's true. Yeah.
So I'm always searching with that as a predominant focus.
So
what is it that I'm thinking that is not true?
Trying to identify what that factor is so that you can see that in the light of day and more easily dismiss it and thereby help to diffuse whatever it is.
Yeah.
That part makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
So lots of questions.
Yeah.
And what was interesting when I was IMing with my coworker afterwards and asking her if she got the insight she was looking for, and she said yes. And then it was interesting that her response was, I don't think I asked enough questions. I'm going to start asking more questions.
Well, it's true.
She knew she asked a couple, but I said you keep asking questions till you get what you want.
It's true that if you are a persistent questioner, you can get almost anything. That is true. I know that. I learned that from my father, that no matter what the situation is, you just keep asking questions, you'll eventually get down to something, some nugget, some piece of information, something. You'll get to some point that's something you can use. So that part I can buy into. It was the part that was, well, how do I know it's going to lead to something productive? In other words, I'll find something. Yeah, I know I'll find something, but will it actually be productive for me? Will it actually help me to move to where I want to get to? That's the part I was struggling the most with, I think.
Only if you keep your focus solid that you want to end when you get whatever it is feeling better. In other words, you never get stuck on the answer. When the answer comes, you don't stay focused on it. That's just a little piece of information, but you keep going.
Okay.
You've got to keep going.
All right. Well,
so it's the persistence piece with a focus of I know where I'm going, and I don't quit until I'm there. And everything you get along the way is just a breadcrumb. Because if Dorothy quit when she was held up in the witch's, room with the crystal ball, that would not be a good ending to the movie.
No.
But she had this look on her face like, how do I get out of here? Toto, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? She kept asking questions.
It was the same question over and over again, but yes, it was asking questions, yes.
But, it's kind of like the movie didn't end with her locked up in the witch's tower because more questions were being asked. And really she started out on the yellow brick road because she wanted to get back to Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Now she went through all sorts of things to get back to Kansas, but if she would have stopped just because those trees were throwing rotten apples at her, she would just be, lying in a heap under a bunch of apples. But she picked herself up, her, Toto, and the rest of them, and they started going again until they ran into the next thing. And they didn't stop there. They said, oh, we have to keep going. We have to keep going. And they did. I love Dorothy. And the Wizard of Oz, it is the perfect metaphor for, I think, all of life.
I gathered that, yeah. Well, it does have nice metaphorical qualities to it. And when you were describing what happened, the thing that did occur to me is, as with most things associated with deliberate creation and the law of attraction, the solution Well, there are two solutions. One solution was how to get rid of the witch, and the other solution was how to get home. The solution for getting rid of the witch was completely unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, basically, the witch was all wet, and when she was all wet, she melted. Like, whoa, that was not expected at all.
But in the beginning, the witch was really scary.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, when Dorothy was told that she needed to get the witch's broom in order for the wizard to send her home, she was willing to go and figure out a way to do that. She didn't know exactly how that was going to happen, but all of a sudden she ran toward the witch and where the witch lived instead of away from the witch.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was set on her goal, which is, I want to go home to Kansas. And the wizard said, this is how it's going to happen. You need to get the witch's broom. Okay. And off she went.
And of
so
course,
she put herself. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, The Wizard of Oz is also a bit of a parallel to our show because they also include humor. I mean, when they brought the broomstick back, how did you pull it off? Well, we threw water on her. Ah, you liquidated her. Very resourceful.
But, I don't know that I ever saw this before, that in the beginning of her landing in Oz, she meets up with the Wicked Witch while she's in the presence of, Glinda the Good Witch.
Mm-hmm.
And, she's scared of her, like, ooh, she looks really unhappy.
Well, Miss Gulch was kind of a miserable person. That would be a scary person.
But it was made known to her that as long as you have those ruby red slippers on your feet, that Wicked Witch is coming after you. So Dorothy was afraid of her. But what never dawned on me is when the wizard said, you have to go get the witch's broom in order to get what you want, which is to go home to Kansas. She pulled herself up by the bootstraps with determination, like, well, then that's what has to happen. So she went literally into the lion's den, where in the beginning of the movie, she was scared to death of the lion.
She went into the lion's den with a cowardly lion.
Now, there's all sorts of irony in that one.
There is a ton of it.
Yeah. But, I mean, it is quite interesting that she was willing to go into the path of the very thing that she feared the most at the beginning because she had her eyes set on her end result, which was Kansas.
Mm-hmm, that's true. She was a very determined young lady.
Well, and metaphorically, that's what I'm wanting to provide as an answer to your question, which is when you ask questions, don't worry about the specific answer that comes up. Just keep your eye on the prize. And
the prize being defined as the emotional shift that removes that.
Whatever it is that you're seeking that caused you to ask the question to begin with.
That's actually a very good point right there. Just that. Because this particular thing I'm dealing with is similar to many other kinds of problems I've dealt with that seemed insoluble. And the reason, well, not the reason, the commonality among them and to this one is that I would never be able, while I was feeling the angst of the what is, I would never be able to pin down exactly what was the one thing that I was so worried about. Because it was more than just one. There was a whole bunch of them. I'd focus on one thing and the next one would pop up. Well, no, it's not that. It's this over here. And I'd focus on that. No, it's not that. It's this over here. It was like, this endlessly shifting. Oh, no, that's not the problem. This is the problem. Oh, no, that's not it. This is the one. It's the kind of problems that give me nightmares.
Now, and you didn't present that in a way that I would coach you. In other words, because we're not in a coaching session,
right,
you just presented some information.
Yeah.
But sometimes what I find, whether I'm coaching myself through something or I'm coaching someone else, they may start with what I call the presenting problem.
Okay.
And then it shifts into something else. Now, that doesn't mean that you're off topic. It means that once you have thoroughly discussed the presenting problem, it takes you to the next thread or the next piece of information that you need to also probe. So it's not like, oh my God, now I have like 10 things. You might only have one because each one has shifted along the way.
So in other words, they're all aspects of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've heard any of the recent CDs with Abraham, and who knows if they're on YouTube, probably. But like I was listening to one the other day where the person asked a question And then Abraham did that thing that Abraham does and starts talking. And then Abraham says, okay, now ask the question again. And they ask it again. And Abraham says, well, that doesn't sound like the same question. You've changed the question.
Mm.
And they said, well, yeah, I kind of can't even remember what the original question was.
That's the part that drives you crazy. Like, what was the original question?
No, that's the part that says you're changing.
True.
You've already morphed the original question, and now that question doesn't exist. But now it gave way to the next question that they asked.
So you're seeing it as like milestone markers. It's not that you're not getting anywhere. It's just that you're getting further along the path, and you may not know exactly where the end is, but you've moved along.
And you don't need to go back to the beginning, because there's no point in reactivating the beginning question. If you can't find it, say yay.
Okay.
I've transmuted it. I'm moving on.
And you don't have to know what it is. That's a good thing.
No. And I listened to one where Abraham was working with this gal, and like every time Abraham would say something, then when they were done, they'd say, okay, now ask the question again. And 4 times in a row, the question was different.
Mm.
And 4 times in a row, the workshop participant felt uncomfortable, like I can't seem to get back to it. Kind of like what you're saying, like there seems to be something wrong. And Abraham's saying, this is the way it's supposed to work.
Mm. Yeah, that's not a way we normally think about stuff. We normally think that this is like, I'm getting nowhere. I'm spinning my wheels. I'm not actually gaining any traction. Looking at that and thinking about it in terms of being progress, that's not the way we normally think about it.
So every time the person asked the question, then Abraham shared some insight. The person wasn't aware, but that person was taking that insight in, and it was reshaping their thinking. And then when they said, okay, ask the question again, it came out different because their thinking had been reshaped.
I'm stuck on not stuck on. I am. What's the word? I'm getting the communication of the Abraham concept. Well, I was getting it. Now I can't remember what it was. So skip that comment. I had this insight and it just went boop. It's gone.
But I have a feeling, Walt, in this conversation, you've shifted your perspective several times.
Yeah, that's
where
fair.
If you can't totally get back to where you were before,
probably a good
don't
thing.
go there. What you want to say is, so what am I feeling now?
Mm-hmm.
What am I feeling now? That's your point of attraction. What are you feeling now? And if there's still something that feels uncomfortable, then question that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And then after you've gone a few iterations of asking some questions and thinking about some new thoughts, then say, well, what am I feeling now? And test. Maybe the feeling has changed a little bit. If it has, then you know you're making progress.
You know what? I'm going to give it a try. I have attacked things as a questioning kind of a thing before, but never along the lines we're describing here, where what I previously thought of as spinning my wheels, I actually decided was progress. I haven't really done that before. Good. So I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens.
Big shift. That's a big shift. And now it's time to end the show.
Well, actually, not quite. We have to take about 30 seconds, maybe 10 seconds to say if you are not yet a subscriber to the show and you would like to be, first of all, we recommend it because you get a lot of great episodes. Second of all, it's simple. Go to the homepage of our website, loatoday.net. The instructions are there. It takes a minute. It's free, and you will never regret it. I promise you're going to love it. So there's the promo. Wendy, if somebody wants some help, how do they reach out for you for a little quantum leaping?
WendyDillard.com. Everything you need to know is there.
There it is. In a nutshell. Wendy, as usual, it's been great. This has been really, really good, and I love the story you shared, so thanks for sharing it.
You're welcome.
And we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye now.